allow us to promote productivity among our economies, more well-being, and as it was mentioned by Minister Sanchez, it will allow us to have more employment and improve the life of Latin Americans as well. It will enable regional integration. So CAF plays an important role in regional integration. All in all, Latin American countries have been implementing policies since the 90s. Policies about opening the trade, reducing tariffs, and similar. Nevertheless, the participation of Latin America continues to be very low, despite that openness that started decades ago. We observe that Latin America, including Mexico, it's around 50% share in the world trade.
Así que
So,
eso lo que demuestra es que a pesar de
this tells us that despite opening our trade market, we are still isolated. We are not being a major player in the global market.
en nuestra inserción internacional,
We observe a stagnation in our insertion. We have an intra-regional trade that is important, yes. When I look into the figures, I observe that
América del Norte,
North America,
60%, el 40% puede tener
40% of North America have inter-regional trade. In Europe, that is 60%. Asia, 60%. Latin America, it's varies 13%. And if we break down Latin America, we see that the Pacific Alliance is 4%, in the Andean community is 10%,
el Mercosur el 15%,
Mercosur is 15%,
algo similar en el mercado.
and similarly for the Central American and CARICOM trade market. What is important is that this is an evident trend.
La única región
The only region in Latin America that has increased intra-regional trade in the recent years is the common Central American market. The rest has been decreasing their participation in the international trade market, but increase among regions. That is a paradox. We should have greater trade.
Esta explicación es porque al estar en las cadenas globales,
When we are in a global value chain, we see that Latin American countries are not including products from the regional partner. We have a low integration in the regional channels. Even countries that are so open to us, like in the Pacific Alliance, we don't see a significant trade, inter-regional trade. We have a program that's called Our Way Towards Integration that tells us that due to the high cost of inter-regional trade, people are not allured to this. The geographical proximities, the reduction in the trade barriers, we see that we have not done enough to reduce them. That is why we need to do the following. We need to reduce the costs. We need to reduce the rates and tariffs among ourselves. Despite the trade agreements that we already have in place, we need to reduce the costs at the border, the cost of infrastructure and logistics, among others. That is why we are working with the countries through the Andean communities so that we can facilitate trade through simplification, harmonization, digitalization, and standardization of customs procedures. We hope that together with the Andean community, customs are better connected, and that should take place regionally.
Los tiempos de desabanamiento en nuestros países mejores.
The custom clearance process needs to be improved. In the U.S. and Canada, we observe that custom clearance takes up nearly 2 hours, but in other countries it takes longer, 90 hours. In the Andean communities and the Pacific Alliance is 85. It takes that long to take out the products and goods. So we need to make a greater effort in that sense. That is why CAF is taking on initiatives to promote trade through one-stop shops and to promote the figures of authorized logistic operators, figures that, entities that facilitate international trade. We are highly concerned about transportation. Neighboring countries should be more keen to have a geographical exchange intra-regionally. We don't have a network of roads or railways. We don't have a transportation mechanism that allows for multimodal transportation with air and water and land transportation. CAF is working. We see that intra-regional costs are 50% points above of those of Europe. When we see that Latin America, despite having as the same geographical location, 47% of trade is still done in water transportation. So we don't have a way to transport our goods and services and products from north to south using land transportation. That is why we need to promote infrastructure for the transportation in the region. We are making efforts to identify logistic corridors. We have to make a great effort to stay connected, not only to take the goods from point A to point B, but also to develop industrial and trade zones that really fosters and drives international trade. We have multimodal nodes and hubs, and we need to boost the infrastructure too. Our infrastructure level is still very low. A low percentage of our budget is devoted to infrastructure. So what we need is that these global value chains to consider the regional products. We need to know which are the Latin American products that can be delivered to the world. We notice that we are just serving a few. Most of the things that we are exporting do not require input from the region. Those goods that are not commodities, that are first manufactured goods, are not that significant in the number of that they are traded. North America has an important consumption of inputs from the North American region. That is why we need to follow their lead. We need to drive multilateral mechanisms for governments to increase their participation in the value chain. Most Latin American countries have signed FTAs. Nevertheless, their agreements don't allow for the integration of products from the region to export the products to Europe or the USA. So we need to come together and identify how we can truly integrate the region to have a platform that can serve as a launching pad to send our products to Europe and other places. We need to facilitate trade. We need to lower the barriers to import and exports. We are observing that there is a scarce regional investment within our countries, and we need to improve as well everything that has to do with service trade. CAF will support governments in their efforts towards that end. We are Latin American countries working for Latin American countries. We have the Green Bank of Latin America and others. And we hope that the countries in the region will find in that bank a partner that will allow Latin America to be a better place in the world. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, doctor
Thank you very
Rojas.
much, Dr. Rojas.
Corporación Andina de Fomento
I
que
admire
nació
that
en
the
1967
Andean Development Bank,
como un
CAF,
proyecto
that was born in 1997 as an interesting
relativamente
project that
pequeño en
was
aquel
relatively
tiempo, haya
small
alcanzado
back
el nivel
then,
que tiene ahora.
has now reached the
Ya
level
no solo
that it currently
Corporación Andina de
has,
Fomento,
not
Banco de
only
Desarrollo de América Latina
Corporación
con
Andina de
alto
Fomento,
prestigio
but
en la
also
banca de
Development
desarrollo
Bank
internacional
that
y capaz
has
de
high
constatar
level
el
of prestige
interés
in international
de
banking,
los
and
principales
it
países del mundo bajo el
gets the
liderazgo
interest of the
del
main
doctor
countries of the
Sergio
world
Díaz
under the
Granados, que ha estado
leadership
esta
of
vez
Sergio
inmejorablemente
Díaz
representado
Granados,
por el
who
doctor Rojas. Muchas
was
gracias por su
represented here by
intervención.
Dr. Rojas. Thank you very much for your intervention.
El señor
Mr. Robert
es
Taliercio
el director
is
regional
the
de
regional director
crecimiento
for
equitativo
equitable growth
y finanzas
and
del Banco
finance of the
Mundial
World Bank
para nuestra región, para
for our
América
region, for
Latina
Latin
y el
America
Caribe.
and the
Y su
Caribbean.
presentación
And
se
his
titula
presentation
Desarrollo de
is
la economía
entitled
digital en las
Development of the
Américas,
Digital Economy
con
in the
especial
Americas,
énfasis en
with a
las
special
micro y
emphasis on
pequeñas
micro
empresas.
and small
Tema también
enterprises.
ciertamente candente
This topic is
en
also a
todo
hot
nuestro
topic
hemisferio.
in our
Él
entire
es de los
hemisphere.
Estados Unidos
He
y
comes
es el
from the
director
United
regional de
States, and he is
crecimiento,
the
equitativo y
regional
finanzas, como dije, del Banco
director
Mundial.
of equitable
Ha sido
growth and
gerente de
finance, as I
práctica
said
para la
before,
región de
from the
América
World Bank.
Latina y
He
el
has
Caribe en la
been
práctica
the manager of
global de
practices
gobernanza
for Latin America
y
and the
gerente de
Caribbean in
práctica
the
del grupo del sector
global
público
practice of
en el
governance,
este
and
de
he's
Asia y
been
el Pacífico.
also the manager for
También ha
East
diseñado y
Asia
dirigido
and
operaciones de
the
políticas de
Pacific.
inversión y desarrollo
And he's also led
y revisiones de
policies of
gastos
investment and
públicos y diagnósticos de
development
gestión
and
financiera
reviews of
pública
public
para una variedad de países.
financial
Evidentemente,
management
la
for a
experiencia
variety
del
of
señor
countries.
Taliercio es
Of course, the
muy grande
experience
en
of
una institución
Robert
de
is
tanto
very large
significado
in an institution
como el
that has such
Banco
a
Mundial.
significant,
Señor Taliercio,
as an institution
Tengo usted la
such
bondad.
as the World Bank.
Muchísimas gracias,
Mr. Taliercio,
embajador,
you have the floor.
ministro.
Thank
Gracias
you very
al
much,
gobierno
Ambassador,
del
Minister.
Perú por
I would like
invitar al
to
Banco Mundial
thank the
a
government
este
of Peru
evento.
for inviting the World Bank to
Estoy
this
muy
event.
entusiasmado de
I
estar
am
aquí
very
con ustedes en
enthusiastic
persona,
because
no en la
I'm
pantalla,
here
y
now
gracias
in
a la
person
OEA
and not
también,
through a screen.
por
And I would like to thank
auspiciar
the
este
OAS
evento.
for
Gracias por su
hosting this
paciencia
event, and I
con
would
mi
like
Spanglish.
to thank you for your
Quisiera
patience
usar,
with my Spanglish.
la
I would
pantalla
like
para
to use
mostrar
the
algunos
screen
datos.
to show
Próximo, por
certain
favor. Y próximo.
pieces of
Quiero
information. Next
comenzar
slide.
con
Next
algunos
slide, please.
retos,
And I would
que
like to
tenemos
start with
en la
certain
región.
challenges that we have
Y
in the
primero
region.
es la infraestructura.
First of all, infrastructure.
Hemos tenido avances
The
en la
region presents
infraestructura
progress
digital
in digital
en la región, pero hay
infrastructure,
todavía
but
algunos
there are
desafíos. Por
still
ejemplo,
some challenges
pueden
that
ver en la
remain.
pantalla
You can
que
see,
la
for example, on the
penetración de
screen
banda
that
ancha
the
fija en
fixed
los lugares de
bandwidth
América
penetration
Latina
in
está a 48%,
households in Latin America is
mucho menos
48%, which is a lot
lo que
lower
tienen en el
than
OCDE, por
what
ejemplo.
they have in
En el Perú,
OECD
31%.
countries, for example.
Y
And in Peru is
aunque el 4G
31%,
cubre
though
80%
4G covers
de la
80%
población,
of
el uso
the population,
es mucho menor,
the
a
actual
37%,
usage is
37%.
much lower.
También la
37%.
asequibilidad sigue
And
siendo una
also,
barrera importante
having
para la
access is
conectividad
still
digital en la
an
región.
important barrier.
En los países
Affordability
de
remains a
América
major
Latina y el
barrier
Caribe,
to digital
el costo
connectivity in
de
the
acceso,
region. In Latin American and Caribbean
por
countries, the
ejemplo,
cost
a
of internet
de 1
access
gigabyte de datos
for
móviles
1 gigabyte of
suele
mobile
superar
data
2%
typically
del
exceeds
PIB,
2%
y
of
esto es
the GDP,
mucho más que
and
lo que
that
vemos en
is
otras
a lot more
regiones.
than what we see
Próximo.
in other regions.
Y vemos también que
Next slide. We
las
also
micro y
see that
pequeñas
micro
empresas,
and
los
small
pymes,
businesses
están rezagadas en la adopción de la
are
tecnología
lagging
digital.
behind in the adoption of digital technology.
Empresas en la región
Many
todavía
companies
no
in
han
the region
adoptado
have not
tecnologías
yet
digitales
adopted
básicas,
core
ni han
digital
aprovechado,
technologies, nor have
las
they
oportunidades
taken
del comercio
advantage of
electrónico.
e-commerce
Por ejemplo,
opportunities. For
en
example,
El Salvador,
in
en la
El Salvador,
parte derecha de la pantalla,
to the right of the
solo
screen,
38%
only
de las micro y
38% of
pequeñas empresas
micro and
usan
small
banda ancha.
businesses use
Lo cual
broadband,
limita su adopción de otras
really
tecnologías y el
restricts
comercio
their adoption of
electrónico.
other technologies and e-commerce.
Y las empresas
And
que no usan
companies
tecnologías
that do not
digitales
use digital
citan como
technologies
barreras
cite as
costo de la
barriers
adquisición,
the acquisition
falta de
cost,
información,
lack of
falta de
information,
habilidades técnicas
lack of
para
technical
operar la
skills to
tecnología.
operate
Así
technology.
que hay realmente
So
un conjunto de desafíos
there is a
en
set
este
of
ámbito
challenges in
para
this
la
regard
adopción de la tecnología digital
of
de los pymes.
digital technologies
También
from
vale la pena mencionar
SMEs.
que
It
la
is also
región
important to
ocupa
mention
el
that the
lugar más
region
bajo
has the
entre todas las
lowest
regiones del mundo
rank.
en
The
cuanto a
region ranks lowest
participación
among
de
all
servicios
regions
digitales
of the world in
en las
terms of share of
exportaciones.
digital services
No sé si
in
vieron,
exports.
pero
I don't know if you saw, but in Chile they have announced a new partnership recently,
con Chile, Singapur,
Chile,
y Nueva
Singapore,
Zelanda
and New
para
Zealand,
promover el comercio digital
to
entre
promote
ellos. Y esperamos en el
digital
Banco Mundial que podemos
trade
ayudar
amongst
a
them,
los
and
demás
hopefully from the
países
World Bank we will be able to help
tomar
other
esta
countries
oportunidad también.
to
Estamos trabajando
tap into
con
this
la
opportunity
Alianza
as well. We are
Pacífico
working with
en
the
un análisis
Pacific
técnico
Alliance to
de
do
los,
a technical
las
analysis
barreras
of the barriers,
Próximo, por favor.
digital barriers. Next
Con
slide.
respecto a los
Now,
servicios
regarding
financieros
financial
digitales,
services,
también
digital
hay
financial
barreras.
services, there are also
Solamente
barriers. Only 35% of adults in Latin America and the Caribbean and 51% of Peruvians
no usan pagos digitales.
do not use
Pero
electronic payment.
esta porción ha
But
disminuido
that share
desde
has decreased
2017.
since
Sí que está
2017.
yendo en una buena dirección, pero todavía
So it's on the right
falta.
track, but
Y comparados con otras regiones,
there's still
los
a way
excluidos
to go. And compared to other regions,
en
those that
América
are
Latina
financially
son más
excluded in
propensos
Latin
a
America
citar
are more
los
likely
costos
to
altos,
cite
falta
to
de
high
confianza en
costs,
los sistemas,
lack of trust
la
in systems,
distancia y la
distance, and
documentación
also
como barreras.
documentation as barriers.
Hay cierta evidencia
There is
también
some
de una alta
evidence as well
concentración
of
del
a
mercado de
high
banco
retail
minorista
banking
en la
market
región, así
concentration
como
in the
barreras
region,
significativas
as well
para
as
la entrada del
significant
mercado.
barriers
Esto tiene
to
que ver
market
con
entry,
la
and that has to
competencia.
do with
Los marcos legales y
competition. The legal
regulatorios
and regulatory
restringen la
frameworks
entrada y el
restrict the
crecimiento de los
entry and
fintechs
growth
en
of
varios
fintechs
países,
in several
lo
countries,
cual limita la
which
competitividad y la
restricts
innovación.
competitiveness and
En varios
innovation.
países la
In several
infraestructura de
countries,
pagos está
the
dominada
payment
por los bancos
infrastructure is
como
dominated by
resultado de
banks
prácticas
as a result of
anticompetitivas, lo cual
anti-competitive
resulta en una
practices,
falta de
which result in a lack of interoperability.
limita mejoras en el diseño de
And
productos
it
financieros.
restricts
Eso es un
improvements
desafío
in the
común,
design
creo
of
que vemos
financial
en
products.
muchos
And I think that that is a
sectores
challenge that
económicos
we
de
see in
América
many
Latina, la
economic
falta de
sectors in
la
Latin America, the lack
Y
of
estamos viendo esto
competitiveness.
también
And we are
en
seeing
varios
that as
países
well
con
in
los
several
gobiernos.
countries with the
Próxima, por
governments.
favor.
Next slide,
Próxima.
please. Next slide.
Entonces, lo que estamos usando en
So
el
what
Banco
we're
Mundial
using
es un
at the
marco
World
conceptual
Bank is
que
a
vea un enfoque
conceptual
integrado
framework with an
sobre la
integrated
economía
approach
digital. Y
regarding
tenemos
the
6
digital
pilares.
economy,
La
and we have
infraestructura
6
digital
pillars,
que he
digital
mencionado,
infrastructure that
las
I've mentioned
plataformas
before,
digitales
the
públicas,
public digital
es decir,
platforms,
el
that is to
apoyo
say,
digital
the
del
digital
sector
support
público,
of the public
los servicios
sector,
financieros digitales
digital
del
financial
lado
services
del sector privado,
from the private
los
sector,
negocios digitales,
and
o mejor dicho, el
digital
emprendimiento
businesses,
digital entrepreneurship, ¿no?
or digital
Tiene que ver
entrepreneurship,
con las
which has
capacidades
to do
de
with
gestión y capacidad
the
técnica del sector
management
privado,
and
las
technical skills
habilidades,
of the
las
private
destrezas
sector,
digitales,
the
¿no?
digital
Si las
skills as well.
universidades están
If the
produciendo
universities are producing
alumnos
or
graduados con las
if they're
destrezas
producing
que
graduates
necesita el sector
with the skills that are needed
hoy
by
en día,
the
y
private
el
sector
ambiente de
nowadays,
confianza
and
o,
an environment of trust
ciberseguridad más que nada.
and cybersecurity
Y
more than
los
anything
temas
else. The
transversales que vemos en
cross-cutting
este
topics that we
enfoque
see
también,
in this
los
approach
marcos
as well
legales y
are the legal
regulatorios
and
para
regulatory
fomentar la
frameworks to
competencia,
promote
la
competition
gestión de riesgos,
and
la
risk
exclusión
management,
social y
social
económica,
and
la
economic
privación digital,
exclusion,
que tiene que
digital
ver cada
deprivation
vez más
that
hoy en
has
día
to
con
do
la
increasingly
desigualdad
with
también.
inequalities
Las brechas de género
nowadays,
y
gender
oportunidades
gaps
para
and
empoderar a las
opportunities
mujeres,
to empower women.
las brechas rurales urbanos que son muy
Rural-urban
importantes en
gaps
varios
that
países
are
de
very
América
important in
Latina,
several countries
y el
of
impacto
Latin America,
Mm.
en el clima.
and the climate change
Próximo.
impact. Next slide, please.
creemos que la
We
transformación
believe
digital
that digital
puede ayudar a los
transformation
países
can help
a impulsar la productividad,
countries to
crecimiento,
boost their
reducir
productivity
la
and
vulnerabilidad
growth,
y crear más
reduce
y mejores
vulnerability,
empleos,
and
como
create more
mencionaba
and better
el ministro.
jobs, as mentioned by the
Hay
minister.
evidencia, por
There is
ejemplo,
evidence, for
que un
instance,
aumento de
that a
10%
10%
en la
increase
penetración de la banda
in
ancha
mobile
móvil
broadband
resulta en un aumento de
penetration results in a
2.5% del
2.5
PIB per
increase
cápita.
of
Así
the
que
GDP
realmente
per
hay
capita.
oportunidades
So I'm
para
sure that there will be
crecimiento
opportunities
importante
of
en
growth
este
that are
ámbito
significant
digital.
in the digital sphere.
Vemos también en este
We
estudio
also
de El
see in
Salvador
this study from El
que la
Salvador
productividad
that
laboral
the
de
labor
las
power
empresas del
activity
sector
of
digital
companies in the
es
digital sector is
significativamente
significantly higher
comparación con
compared
con el
to
negocio
the
promedio,
average business,
4.5 veces mayor. Ahí
4.5
es un esquema que usamos
times
para cómo
more.
pensar en
So here we
las
have to
soluciones
think
y los
about
resultados
the
intermedios
solutions
y
and
a
the
lo
intermediate
largo
results
plazo.
and the long-term
Próximo, por
results as
favor.
well. Next slide, please.
Y en todo el mundo, la buena
Throughout
noticia
the
es
world,
que
the good
la
news
pandemia
is that the
demostró
pandemic
que es
has
posible
proven that
un
it
progreso
is
más rápido.
possible
Y veamos en
to
las encuestas
have
de
faster
empresas que
progress.
hicimos por todo el
Let's take a
mundo,
look at
el
the
uso
surveys that we did in
mayor de
companies throughout the
servicios
world.
digitales.
The-
Aquí tenemos
They are using more
los
digital
resultados para
services, and
algunos
here we have the
países en la
results for some
región
countries
de
in the
estas
region.
encuestas, World
The
Bank
results of
Business
these
Pulse
surveys, the World
el
Bank
porcentaje de
Business
empresas que
Pulse surveys,
iniciaron o
the percentage of
aumentaron
companies
el uso de
that
plataformas digitales.
increased or
No
wish to
tenemos
increase
esta
the
encuesta
usage
para
of digital
todos los
platforms.
países,
We do not have
lastimosamente,
this
no
survey
lo
for all
tenemos en el Perú,
countries.
pero se
Unfortunately,
puede
we
ver
do not
más o
have that
menos
for Peru, but we can more or less see
en todos
that
los países, bueno,
in all
en
of
estos
the
países
countries
aquí
that were
que han
surveyed
aumentado
here,
el
they
uso de
increased
plataformas
the usage
digitales.
of digital platforms.
Y se ve también
And we
que
can also see
el uso ha sido menor
that
en las medianas
the usage
y aún
has
menor en las
been lower
pequeñas
in
empresas.
medium-sized
Entonces,
and even lower
todavía
in
existe este
small-sized
desafío que
companies.
mencioné
So
al
there is
inicio
still this
de
challenge
cómo
that I
ayudar a
mentioned at the
los
beginning in
pymes
terms
a
of how
poder
to help
adoptar y
SMEs
usar
adopt
y
and
beneficiarse
use
de
and to
los,
benefit
de
from
las plataformas digitales.
digital platforms.
Próximo, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Y también el uso de los pagos
But also the use of
digitales
digital payment
aumentó
increased
durante la
during the
pandemia.
pandemic.
Si veamos los datos del Global
If we
Findex,
see the
muestra
data
que
from the Global
11% de los
Findex, it
adultos
shows
en
that
LAC,
11% of
es decir,
adults in
50
Latin America and the
millones de
Caribbean, that is to say 50
hicieron
million
pagos
people, made
comerciales digitales
digital
en
payments
tiendas por primera vez
at stores for the
durante la
very
pandemia.
first time
Entonces, esta
during the
cifra
pandemic.
todavía me
So this
impacta
figure has a great
50 millones
impact
de
to me
personas
because
por primera
50
vez, ¿no?
million people
Usando
for the first
los pagos
time
digitales.
using electronic payment.
Y bueno,
And
obviamente las empresas que
obviously,
ya tenían
the surprises
la infraestructura, las
that
habilidades fueron
they found
mucho
in terms
mejor
of infrastructure
ubicados de tomar,
and skills.
aprovechar
But if they had skills already, they were in a better position to tap into this effect,
y también los gobiernos,
more so than the ones who didn't, and also
tenían,
governments, the governments who had digital services
ya listos,
ready
pudieron aprovechar
were
de
able
esta
to
oportunidad.
leverage that
Recuerdo en la
opportunity.
Argentina,
I remember in Argentina,
establecieron
they established
soluciones digitales del sector
digital solutions
público,
for the
servicios
public
públicos
sector,
digitales.
digital
Antes de
public
la
services
pandemia fueron
before
usados
the
por
pandemic, and
alrededor de
this
1 millón de personas.
was
Durante la pandemia,
used by around
pasó a
1 million
5
people, and during the
millones.
pandemic, that figure increased in 5.
Bueno, y también
million.
muchos países usaron
And
las
also,
medidas
many countries
digitales para
used
pagar
digital
transferencias sociales
mechanisms
durante la
to
pandemia.
pay
Colombia,
cash
Perú,
transfers during the
Guatemala,
pandemic. Colombia,
Argentina.
Peru, Guatemala, Argentina.
Próximo, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Entonces quisiera
Now
tomar
I
un
would
minuto
like
para
to take a minute
subrayar
to
la importancia
highlight the importance
de los esfuerzos para mejorar la
of
competitividad.
efforts to improve competitiveness.
Muchos de las ganancias
Many
recientes
of the
en la
recent
inclusión
gains in
financiera en
financial
la región
inclusion in the
están
region
derivadas de
stem
reformas
from
para promover la
reforms to promote
competencia y
competition
abrir el
and
mercado de
open
fintech y
the
proveedores de
fintech
servicios
market
financieros
and
digitales.
the market of
Estos nuevos
digital
modelos
financial
de
service
fintech
providers. These new
aprovechan la
fintech
tecnología
models
digital
leverage digital
y las bases de los
technology
clientes
and the
existentes, por
existing
ejemplo,
customer
telefónicas,
base. For
empresas de
example,
comercio
telephone
electrónico,
companies, e-commerce
empresas de
companies,
redes
social
sociales,
media
cada vez
companies.
es más común poder
It is
pagar
increasingly common
adentro
to pay
de tu app, ¿no? Para una red
using
social
an app
que usa.
for a
Y
social
estos reducen los costos
media
y,
outlet that you use, and that
mejoran
reduces
el diseño de
costs
los productos
and improves the
financieros
design
también.
of financial
Por ejemplo,
products
en
as
Brasil,
well. For example, in
reformas
Brazil,
para permitir la
reforms
entrada
to
de los
allow the
fintechs
entry of
y
fintechs
fomentar la
and promote
interoperabilidad han
interoperability
contribuido al crecimiento
have
de la
contributed to the
inclusión
growth of
de
financial
70%
inclusion from
a
70% to 84% between 2017
Reformas en
and
Paraguay
2021.
también
Reforms in
para permitir la
Paraguay
entrada
as well
de los
to allow the
proveedores de
entry
dinero
of
electrónico
e-money
han contribuido al
providers
crecimiento de la
has
inclusión
contributed
financiera
to
de
the
una
growth
manera
of financial
impresionante,
inclusion
de
in an
22%
impressive
a
way, from
54%
22%
en
to
10 años.
54% in 10
Y
years.
esfuerzos
And
recientes para
recent efforts to
identificar
identify and eliminate anti-competitive practices in the retail banking market, such as in Argentina, Brazil, Peru, and Mexico, represent an important trend to foster the growth of an electronic financial services ecosystem.
Próximo, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Entonces, para cerrar,
To sum
quisiera
up,
mencionar
I would
algunos
like to mention
tipos de apoyo que
some
tenemos para
types of
fomentar
support
la
that we have to
transformación
foster digital
en América Latina.
transformation
Primero,
in Latin
siempre
America.
comenzamos con
First
un
of all, we always
diagnóstico, ¿no?
start
Para entender
with a
el
diagnosis. To
contexto.
understand the
Tenemos 4
context, we
países
have 4
donde estamos
countries
apoyando a
that
los gobiernos
where we are supporting
analizar la economía
governments
digital.
analyze the digital
Actualmente, El
economy
Salvador,
currently.
Colombia,
El Salvador, Colombia,
Jamaica, y
Ecuador, and
más que ya
Jamaica,
están
and there are
siendo
more
preparados.
that are being
Asistencia
prepared.
técnica
Technical
para
assistance
desarrollar marcos
to develop
legales y
legal and
regulatorias,
regulatory frameworks
con respecto a la estrategias
regarding
para
the
el desarrollo de la
strategies
economía
for the
Fintech,
development of the digital
GovTech, hemos
economy.
trabajado mucho en
Fintech,
México, por
GovTech,
ejemplo,
we have worked
México
extensively in
tiene,
Mexico, for instance.
todavía el
Mexico
primer
still
ley
has the
de
first
Fintech en América
fintech
Latina, ¿no? Y
law
esto fue muy
in
importante
Latin
para el
America,
desarrollo
and that was
de
extremely
este
important
sector
for
allá.
the development of that sector there.
También apoyo para medidas
Also support for critical
críticas,
measures
apoyados con los préstamos de política de
supported
desarrollo
by
o budget
development
support.
policy loans or
También
budget
tenemos varios
support.
proyectos de
And we have
inversión
also several
en el
investment
Perú,
projects in
fortalecimiento del
Peru,
sistema
the strengthening
nacional
of the
de ciencia,
national
tecnología
system of
y
science,
innovación.
technology, and
En
innovation.
Uruguay,
In
en
Uruguay,
Argentina,
in our
proyectos de
Argentina,
gobierno digital o GovTech.
GovTech
Y en
projects,
México, el Sistema Nacional de
and in
Identidad
Mexico, the
para
National Identity
facilitar la
System to
inclusión.
facilitate
Identificación, ¿no?
inclusion.
ID.
Identification,
Es todavía un desafío
ID,
también
right?
importante
That is
en
still
varios
an
países.
important
Bueno, estos
challenge
son
in several
algunos
countries.
ejemplos del tipo
Well,
de
these are some
apoyo
examples of the
que
type of
estamos
support
brindando
that we are
en la región.
delivering
Muchas
in the
gracias de
region.
nuevo.
But once again, thank you very much.
Muy agradecido, señor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Talercio, for your right presentation. It will enlighten the debate later on.
Harrington es el
Now we will listen to Neil Harrington. He is the Senior Vice President for the Americas of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
precedido de un gran
He
académico.
has a vast academic knowledge. He has a master's degree from the Loudon Wharton Institute, and he is leading the
En la
Council of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce
con Cuba,
and the Cuba, Colombia, and Argentina Commission, and he has been a VIP of General Motors for strategic planning.
Harrington,
Neil Harrington will talk about strengthening and resilience of supply chains in the region.
lo vamos a escuchar con mucha atención, señor Harrington.
We are going to pay a lot of attention to what you're saying. Thank you very much, Mr. Forsyth. Thank you very much for your kind remarks. I am going to ask you to be patient with me because I don't speak perfect Spanish, but I would like to also thank to the OAS, Secretary Almagro, and the Peruvian government for warmly receiving us, Minister Sanchez, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. Today, we're going to talk about the resilience of supply chains. This is a topic that we have been following for very closely for some time now. even before the pandemic.
Creemos firmemente que podemos hacer
We strongly believe that we can do much more to promote regional integration through more robust and resilient supply chains.
Para nosotros avanzamos este esfuerzo.
We are making this effort most recently thanks to the CEO summit that we held in
de organizar en Los Ángeles,
junto
a la
together with
Cumbre de las Américas, la novena cumbre.
the 9th Summit of the Americas.
Algunos de ustedes participaron, así que
Some of you had the opportunity to participate at the summit.
En los cuales nosotros enfocados
The topics that we used for Los Angeles and that we continue to follow closely in the business sector are those associated to the resilient supply chains.
Que tienen sobre todo
especially those supply chains that are mostly focused on sustainable and inclusive development through commerce, healthcare services, resilient digital transformation, energy transition, the promotion of SMEs in the supply chains, and especially the adherence to the rule of law.
Muy bien. La cumbre mostró nuevamente el gran compromiso que tiene.
Once again, the summit showed the great commitment that the private sector has with the government in the Americas, and this mutually energetic and responsible business relationship. Through trade, the U.S. is having over $2 billion in the balance trade with the countries in this hemisphere. The U.S. companies are employing directly 4 million people overseas, from the Canadian Arctic down to the last bit in Chile. It is very important when we talk about supply chains to promote the investment in resilient supply chains. And I want to highlight the word investments. Sometimes people think that only the private sector is the one that invests. Yes, it is true that when we talk about supply chains, we refer to how companies are manufacturing goods and how they are delivering to the market. We must bear in mind that in that sense, we are not only close to the market or to the private sector. We want to highlight that we need investment to have resilient supply chains, and that is in the hands of the government.
Cabe tocar en los factores más importantes en la construcción.
For example, the construction sector. They are important for building resilient and robust supply chains in the region. Sustainable trade and the policies regulating digital trade and the needs for having a rule of law in the region are three of the elements that are necessary for this. The goals of the governments when it comes to supply chains, the goals of the governments will change depending on the output. I'm going to tell you about this. For a small limit, the onshoring, that is, the production of the inputs in the same country may be the correct goal, but in the U.S., the law required for many years that a significant amount of the products of the defense industry be, as well as key inputs, will be produced in the country. This is for critical technologies and state-of-the-art technologies. Nevertheless, this is a limited array of products, and it's important to say this because when you try to produce many other goods in a given country, that may result in very costly mistakes.
Punto de productos, el nearshoring o el
The nearshoring or friendshoring
de aliados
or the friendshoring of allies
puede acortar las cadenas de
may reduce the size of the supply chains.
proteger contra interrupciones.
They can
diversificar el
protect
suministro,
us
tener
against interruptions and diversify the trade in general. For example, the
a
apparel
menudo hecha con
manufacturer in Colombia, Mexico, usually comes
los productores
thanks to are prepared with the inputs of the U.S. It builds a business for the U.S. companies
una tercera
and neighboring countries. The third category in the suitable
la resiliencia,
government policies would be
mitigar los riesgos
the
de la-
mitigation of the risk of supplying a vast array of geographical locations and reducing the access to copper, lithium, cobalt, the production of solar panels, turbines,
entre otros
and
productos
other
de
products. These are just a sample of the high-priority products that can bring more resilient to the supply chains
nuestra región.
in our region.
Actualmente China representa más de la
Currently, China represents over half of the world
de
production
elementos
of
de tierras raras
rare elements
y otros
products,
minerales estratégicos.
as well as strategic minerals.
Las Américas como
Products.
un todo tiene,
Nevertheless, in the Americas, we find greater reserves than those of China.
una oportunidad para que la región
And that is an opportunity for the region to work together and promote the production of minerals that have strong
para estar
environmental
los
safeguards.
desafíos que pueden traer
We can be
a la cadena de
we can level the playing field for the supply chain.
bueno, hablando del comercio digital, la
Talking
economía
about
es
digital
crítica
government.
para impulsar el crecimiento, la
Digital economy is critical to boost economy, drive growth.
2/3 partes de todos los servicios
2/3 of the services can be traded digitally.
Es una palabra difícil para mí.
Sorry, that word was difficult for me to say.
La entrega digital
We can expand the digital trade of services.
¿en qué medida? Las pequeñas empresas
The
exportadoras
SMEs exporting goods are the ones that benefit the most with digital trade.
se han impuesto
In recent years, we have noticed that there are more world barriers to digital trade. If we don't stop them, it will halt the digital trade.
Para la Cámara y las empresas alrededor del mundo que conforman
For the U.S. Chamber and the companies around the world, there is no other topic as important as the addition or adherence to the rule of law.
en todo nuestro hemisferio.
By having a greater adhesion to the rule of law, we will have more resilient value chains and supply chains, and the possibilities like nearshoring can be obtained.
Hablado muy bien de eso.
Secretary Almagro explained it very well with his words at the beginning of this
Las
conference.
empresas buscan invertir en los mercados que
Companies are looking to invest
instituciones públicas y privadas y donde existe justicia, aplicación y
we need to have justice and law enforcement.
Este tema tiene para las
This
empresas.
is a topic that is of the utmost importance for the company.
Derecho en los mercados globales.
The global markets need rule of
La
law.
comisión identificó 5 factores
We have
esenciales
identified 5 essential factors that determine the capacity of any companies to make good decisions when it comes to investment and operations. That is transparency, flexibility, stability, accountability, and the due process.
¿Cuándo y dónde estos factores están
Whenever we
presentes?
find them,
La inversión prospera.
then
Las
investment
economías
will
crecen.
prosper, the economy will grow,
Avanza.
and then the community
Cuando
will
están ausentes los factores
advance.
anteriores, la corrupción prospera.
When we don't have them, then corruption will abound. The fiscal income will be
Oportunidades
cut
como nearshoring,
back.
Rutherford, inversión,
we need to have reassuring investment, and the government and the private sector need to come together to strengthen the work done by the business sector to create employment and have sustainable growth. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to give you the floor.
Muy agradecido.
Thank you very
señor
much,
Harrington.
Mr. Harrington.
El tema de la doctora Raquel
The
Artecona
topic
es
that Raquel
el comercio
Artecona will
y la
talk about
competitividad de
is
América
Latin
Latina
Americans'
en
trade
la
and
economía
competitiveness
global.
in the global economy.
También viene precedida de un extraordinario cartel académico, es
She
doctora en
has a
economía
vast
de la
experience
American
as well. She's a
University,
doctor in
con una
economy,
maestría en la
economics
Universidad de
from the American
Kansas.
University with a
Ella
master's
está a
degree from
cargo
the
de
Kansas
la
University,
oficina de
and
la
she's in
CEPAL,
charge
Comisión
of the
Económica para
ECLAC
América Latina en
office.
Washington. Anteriormente ha sido también
And she's
analista
also been an
senior
analyst, a
en
senior
el Banco
analyst
Mundial.
at the World
Es
Bank.
para este foro empresarial
For this business forum,
una suerte muy grande y un honor contar
we feel very
con una
fortunate
presencia de
to
una
have the
profesional tan
presence of a
distinguida
professional as
y muy
distinguished as
reconocida en
you,
los
who is
círculos
highly reputed in the
académicos
academic
en
circles
la capital de los Estados
in the
Unidos.
capital
Doctora
of
Artecona, por favor,
the
tiene el
U.S.
uso de la
Dr.
palabra.
Artecona, please, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Quisiera agradecer
I would like to
la
thank
invitación al gobierno del Perú.
the government of Peru for the
y a la
invitation,
OEA.
and I would like to thank the OAS.
Es difícil hablar
It is difficult to be the last one to speak in a panel where I think that we are all in agreement. Basically, we want to improve the insertion of Latin America and the Caribbean in the world, and we want that insertion to have a value added that is more important to achieve to generate more competitiveness, better productivity, better employment, better salaries, and prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. And basically, I believe that we all agree that the regional integration could be a good vehicle to achieve that. That has been an aspiration of the region for a long time. And as shown, and as I will show in the figures that I have prepared for you, we're still far from that. It's still an aspiration. But I believe that increasingly the data are compelling in terms of that is the way to go. And amongst other things, the digitalization of the Americas will contribute or would facilitate to integrate, and it would increase the size of the regional market, and it would be more attractive for investors if the prices that have already been mentioned before go down, and basically it would be linked to be part of those value chains that now seem that they will be regionalized, and that's where we can see the opportunities for Latin America and the Caribbean. Many of the things that I will say in my presentation that you are seeing now will repeat or just add some data. Basically, the region was already in a situation of growth, very slow growth before the onset of the pandemic. And the pandemic affected the region even more so than the rest of the world, and beyond its percentage of the population, and that is because of several reasons. And that has an impact on economic growth and also on international growth and on the living conditions of the region. So basically, based on that, knowing that we were not at a good level either, the pandemic came and then a recovery started, and that is later impacted by the war in Ukraine. So there is an asymmetrical and heterogeneous recovery in a context of high uncertainty, where we can see a recovery, especially in 2021, of international trade that was significant, but a trend towards the global reconfiguration of the value chains. There are important agendas in the United States and in Europe
to
la autosuficiencia productiva en algunos sectores.
look for self-sufficiency, productive self-sufficiency in some sectors that are considered to be strategic. And that in the region was also shown with a high level of recovery of trade in 2021 and the slowdown that was expected of this regional trade. But obviously when we speak of the region is highly heterogeneous, and all of these changes have an impact on different groups of countries in a different way. And there was also an impact on intra-regional trade. And we can see that it is recovering. However, it has not reached the levels that we had before the pandemic. And well, what is the agenda, the integration agenda? As I said before, the role of integration for a resilient recovery and dynamic sectors for productive integration and a primordial role for sustainable and electronic commerce. Well, very swiftly, world trade slows down. In 2022, it had grown in 10%. These are data from WTO, and it is expected that for 2022 it will go down to 3%, so it's been an important slowdown, a downturn. There is an important increase of the prices for raw materials and commodities. And many countries of the region export them, but altogether when we take a look at the terms of exchange, the region loses 7% in terms of their purchasing power for exports. And obviously that is very different for those of the producers in the region and exporters of hydrocarbons. They have an improvement of 17%, and others that both import and export those products have an advantage, a comparative advantage, but not that much. And those that are net importers of commodities are not favored in interregional trade in the terms of exchange. So this is just simply something that I said before, that is a trend towards a more regionalized value chain that was mentioned before. And what can be the impact for the region of this search for regionalization of the value chains, and of course the impacts? We're going to see them in the long term, because that implies important decisions of the large companies. Where are they going to be located? Where are they going to receive their supplies from? It's not an effect that we are going to observe in the short term, and therefore it makes sense for the region to think on the long run and how we're going to try to leverage that opportunity, and how can we attract the investment to achieve nearshoring in an intelligent way with value added in exports. Well, we have already repeated that once again. That was the disruption of supply chains in the pandemic. And one of the things that was observed was a steep increase in the price of shipments. And of course that has an impact in global trade, and it favors as well this trend to regionalization. In addition to other considerations such as climate change and the reduction of the carbon footprint, etc., there are several factors that are having an influence on making the decision to regionalize the value chains. Now, in terms of the region, what is the regional scenario? Well, trade in the region has recovered. Well, I think that I'm in the wrong slide. I moved too quickly. Well, it's here. And especially as you can see, the exports that are reactivated or that recover more swiftly are the exports to China. 40% of growth is what we see here, as compared to the exports of Latin America and the Caribbean towards the world that had an increase of 31%. So basically, the exports that grew the most in 2021 were to China and to
Latin America and the Caribbean because of very different reasons. China is the economy that has recovered more quickly after the pandemic, and therefore it demands more exports from the region, and they are absolutely focused on commodities. However, Latin America, that is also recovering but more slowly, also demands again more products from the region, but they tend to be more related to manufacturing, they used to say more value added. The goods recover very differently from services, and that has to do with the characteristics that are germane of the pandemic and the measures that were taken to prevent infections, and that was a total reduction of travel, mobilization, etc. Tourism has not recovered yet, and we're going to see in this slide that none of the countries of the region has achieved to attain the inward tourism levels that they had before the pandemic, with an exception. Mexico and the Dominican Republic are along that path, but they're still not there yet. So when we say that trade is recovering, that is especially in goods and not in services because of the reasons that I have just mentioned. Imports, different from exports, grow as well, but especially in terms of volume. And that is a reflection that the economic activity of the region has grown, and therefore it demands more products, more goods. What is concerning about this graph that we showed, as a matter of fact, we showed that imports go up as a reflection of the economic activity. What we see is a reduction in the import of capital goods, and that, in the share of the total imports, and that is not important because it has to do with the productivity of the countries of the region. And what we want is to have a good international insertion and to leverage the opportunities of global trade. We need to be competitive. We need to increase our competitiveness. And for that, we need to innovate and invest. And that goes hand in hand with the import of capital goods. I already said that. Specifically, the prices go up for what we export and the volume of what we import. We can see this year a slowdown. I mentioned that before, and that is because the level of activity has gone down of our main importers, so we tend to export less. Now, what we have seen in terms of recovery is an increase of intra-regional exports, and that is what we want. That's what we want to see. The first panel member of the CIF already talked about the importance of intra-regional trade because of the reasons indicated by many of the panelists and the relatively low intra-regional trade that we have in the region if we compare that to intra-European trade and the need to grow. It is encouraging that in terms of recovery, we see a recovery of intra-regional trade. Nonetheless, we are not yet. 2 slides more, please. Sorry. Here. So this is what I was showing you. We are recovering intra-regional trade. That is the green line. 13% of the trade in the region is intra-regional. But look that some years ago, in 2005, and even in the 90s, we had 21% that we already considered to be insufficient. 13% is considered to be good because it's growth if we compare it to the previous years, but it's still not enough. And that's where the regional agenda should be looking at. Once again, here what we would like to emphasize is the difference of the repercussions of everything that happens in international trade and the different economies of the region, simply because of the basket of goods that we export are very different. So basically, South America and the Caribbean will be the ones with the fastest growth, simply because they import commodities and hydrocarbons. Now, those that are more concentrated in manufacturing, they can see an increase of exports that are more slow. And basically, the next slide, the next one, here we see that, as a matter of fact, we have basically three groups of countries in the region: those that export manufacturing products, those who export agricultural products and minerals, and those that export hydrocarbons. And here we can see that the increase in the demand, or the volume especially, is in manufacturing, and the rest is dropped by the prices. And that is important because that is determined by the international market. Therefore, this is an exogenous effect, and the region has less to do here. One of the things that we like to show, more slides. Next slide. So at ECLAC, one of the things that happened was that trade, electronic trade, grew steeply in several areas. But look, in Latin America and the Caribbean, it grew even more than in other parts of the world. And that is encouraging. That is encouraging because e-trade allows us to have access to the international market in a way that is more direct. And it facilitates the sale of professional services through the internet, and also because that promoted domestic trade. So when we speak of piloting in the economies of the region to later grow outbound, that also has an important component for that. And that is what we wanted to emphasize in terms of how to increase competitiveness and how to improve trade. There is an agenda, a world agenda, but also a regional agenda. It has been mentioned in this panel several times that regulation needs to be improved for regional trade. A regional agenda needs to be created to facilitate trade in this sense, and promoting access to SMEs to this regional trade, and to modernize regulations, as I said before, and to improve logistics, which is one of the bottlenecks in our region. There is a great potential to solve many of the bottlenecks that we find in the region, like the facilitation of trade, etc. So we consider that that is an important agenda. You already saw that it is important for all of the institutions that we're trying to promote. We're trying to promote the development of the region. In addition to that, I wanted to mention that there is a ministerial meeting in Montevideo, and ECLAC is the host, and that has to do with the information society, and it precisely addresses all of these issues, and decisions are made at the ministerial level to precisely promote this agenda. So it's not only something that we say, but the governments now own it, and the institutions are trying to support it. So basically, next slide. Well, I have many of the things that I have already said, that have already been mentioned, and since we're running out of time, I will just basically say that we need to take into account what is happening in the world stage, in global trade. We need to try to improve intra-regional trade. We need to look for a regional integration to achieve the market sizes that will allow us to be more competitive and to be more attractive for direct foreign investment, and to tap into the opportunities that this regionalization of value chains can offer eventually to the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Artecona, and thank you to the Minister Sanchez, Santiago Rojas, Robert Talercio, Neil Harrington for your interventions. Your interventions have exceeded our expectation. This has been a great forum, and we are very thankful to all of you. There are many reasons for that. Because of time constraint, we just have room for a couple of questions. So now we are going to open the floor for 3 questions.
alguna inquietud de los presentes.
So the panelists can answer
Adelante, por favor.
the
Su
questions.
nombre
Please tell us your name
y a quién desea preguntar.
and to whom the question is addressed. Good morning to all the organizers of this event and you. I congratulate you because these regional presentations have been quite interesting. Something caught my attention. Robert Taliercio said something about SMEs digitalization. Peru is one of the countries that have a high rate of informal companies. Therefore, this is an issue that we have been dealing with for a long time. You have done certain studies in some countries, so I was wondering, how do you see Peru's performance? How can the government increase the competitiveness and adhesion to digitalization of the SMEs, especially those that we are looking with great concern? How can we make them grow? Thank you very much for your question. It is a very important question. The rate of informality in Peru and other countries in Latin America is very high, and it has been so for many decades. It has been an economic issue for many years. Last year we published a report on world informality, and we have issued a set of recommendations. It's not only about the taxing format, but also not all businesses are playing with the same rules. Not everybody knows how to handle or manage a business. I have a colleague that works in the tourist sector in Peru. He said that it takes over 1 million days to register a new hotel in Peru. So regulations also play an important role and has a negative impact in companies. There must be an incentive to be formal. Entrepreneurship as well, it's important. There are different challenges there. I recommend you to read a book that we published last year, and that is and you can read from the World Bank website. Regarding Peru's performance in digital economy, there are some ideas that I want to bring forward. First is that Peru has programs to support companies to use technology. The program is called Innovate Peru, and it's going to be interesting and useful to assess those programs to see what they have done, what steps they have made, what is yet to come, so that we can see the impact that they are having and what is the impact that we want them to have. We can also assess the productivity of the financial sector. For example, the entrance of the fintech companies. Where are the barriers for competitiveness? Does that has to be the digital payments, open banking, and so on? There is an infrastructure issue in Peru, as well as in other countries. To solve that problem, we need investment. Yes, it's a challenge that Peru is facing. The other thing that you can do is to promote GovTech, that is digital government, so that companies can have access to digital services that are more agile and less expensive. That is an information that requires more time. We can discuss this later on another moment. Thank you. Next question.
darnos su nombre?
The lady has the floor. Can you give us your name, please?
Buenos días.
Good morning. I kindly thank the invitation of the National Industry Society. They invited me to this important event. I have a question, but most importantly, I have a petition. My name is Sara Alves. I am economist of the San Marcos University. I have a small-sized company engaged in the trade of industrial goods for the oil sector. Usually, I am importing all types of pieces, spare parts, and inputs for this sector. I want to share with you and also ask you to help me with the following. In the U.S., we have manufacturing companies specialized in these types of inputs.
Dejar sus productos directamente al cliente final.
They have as a way of practice of giving their products directly or shipping them directly to their final user, foregoing or bypassing the small companies. What do I mean with this? There are Peruvian companies and mining companies in Peru, because of the crisis, are now preferring to support small companies, to leverage the economy, to provide facilities in terms of time that it takes to import the goods and the logistics. So, what I would like to see is for these large business companies in the U.S. that are engaged in the manufacturing of inputs for the oil sector to use small companies in Peru that are supporting clients in Peru to do trading. That is the comment. How can you do that? Can you help us with that? Can anyone from the panel respond to that question?
Adelante, por favor, doctor.
Mr. Neil Harrington has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to talk to you later on and keep in contact with you. There are several strategies developed by the department. Sometimes even people in the United States get confused. They confuse the Chamber of Commerce with the Department of State of the U.S. Nevertheless, there are several strategies that the U.S. government is making to level the playing field, as we say it in English, for the SMEs. We have set out priorities in the Summit of the Americas, and I would like to talk to you about what can we do to help you get in touch with the officers. And you can use me as a point of contact with these companies. Thank you very much. To the lady and to Mr. Harrington. I want to intervene for a second. I understand that the gentleman requested the floor beforehand. Can you tell us your name and to whom are you addressing the question? Hello, I am Kim Manager. I have an open question. Basically, during the pandemic, we have been working strongly in cyber topics. So digitalization has created this wave in terms of cyber threats. And I have a questions for those of you who want to answer. What are the strategies that are you thinking about at the Latin American level to deal with cyber attacks? Of course, not only about how to protect people against cyber attacks, but also how are you going to enforce cybersecurity?
Distinguidos panelistas, señor ministro.
Anyone from the panel can answer?
Adelante, por favor, doctor Talercio.
Mr. Talercio has the floor. Well, I can start and then give the floor to the next person. Yes, this is an important question. The World Bank is working with the government on this topic. We have investment projects with different governments in the region. I'm not going to delve into the details right now. These projects have components in them. For example, how to strengthen public systems against cyber attacks. There are projects about the supports that the government can provide the private sector. You may have read in the newspapers that we have encountered several attacks in the region. There was a case where the Ministry of Finance was attacked. There are other issues as well, but what we want to say is that we are looking to strengthen the public sector system. There are other challenges, and that is the skills. The question is, are universities training the students that we need with the level of skill that we need and the capacities we need? My own son is studying at Virginia Tech. This is one of the top universities in technology, and he's studying cyber security, and he sees that there's a lot of room for him to grow there because the government is requiring people with that type of skill. So we need to see both sides of the coin, not only the requirements of the private and public sector, but also the education and what the university, what the academia brings to the floor.
La intervención final de nuestro evento.
The final intervention of this event is in the hands of the minister. Thank you for your question.
Primero, creo que en el caso de Perú,
in the case of Peru, we need to acknowledge that the private sector has played a proactive role and has been resilient.
El comercio electrónico el año pasado,
e-trade last year exceeded the $5 billion, 50% more. 9.5 billion. That is very important to highlight because it challenges the public sector. It challenged the public sector to be more digitized. Also, for foreign trade and tourism sector, we just signed an agreement with the CAF for the digitization of the entire sector. This is important. That is the only way for us to become more competitive. And we are feeling the effects in the playing field. We passed a law. Sometimes we pass a law without agreement, but this is a law that will levy taxes on sports gambling online. What is difficult here when we are now in the process of developing the regulations, one of the difficult elements for the regulations is cybersecurity.
camino al andar, como decimos.
We are learning as we walk.
Estamos comparando regulaciones en ciberseguridad.
We are comparing now regulations on cybersecurity from different countries.
El extremo de dificultad son 28 procedimientos diversos.
We have 28 different procedures,
Es la interconexión.
and the key is interconnection of system.
Esperamos el próximo lunes.
We hope that by next Monday we can publish a draft of the
El
regulation.
año pasado ha movido $1.000 millones.
Last year, that sector moved $1 billion.
Desarrollo del turismo.
And we're thinking about the development of tourism, sports, mental health, that will contribute to those ends.
Estamos trabajando, ¿no? En el caso de algunas regiones, destinos turísticos,
In the case of tourist destinations, we have several
región del Perú,
places. For example, Arequipa.
en su identidad y en sus logros, ha logrado
Arequipa has attained a nomination. They have been selected to be the tourist destination to become the venue for this important event, and we salute that.
Como es el caso a un trabajo importante de la Municipalidad de Lima,
Also, we salute the municipality of Lima
también un componente importante de la digitalización.
because they have significantly digitized their government. Some municipalities are opening the way, others are following their lead, but little by little we'll get there.
Gracias, Ministro Sánchez.
Thank you, Minister Sanchez, and once again I thank all our guest panelists and the audience for being here. This is the first session of the Business Forum. I think that it has been a very successful one.
Tenemos algo exquisito, un panel.
We have a gastronomy panel now, quite exquisite one, that is led by the Deputy Minister of Tourism of the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, Mrs. Isabel Alvarez. The topic is regional cuisines, cultural heritage, and engine of tourist development. So please stay put.
Muy agradecido.
Thank you very much for being here.
Agradecemos a los miembros de la mesa.
We want to thank the members of the panels of the Foreign Trade Roundtable. We want to thank the Minister of Tourism and also Mauricio Fernandini. We kindly invite them to come to the floor and sit in the assigned seating.
A continuación, la mesa sobre gastronomía.
Now, the table about culinary arts.
primer lugar, se dirigirá a
First of
nosotros la
all,
señora viceministra de Turismo,
we'll hear from
Isabel
the
Álvarez.
Deputy Ministry of
Señora
Tourism,
viceministra,
Isabel
por favor.
Álvarez. Mrs. Deputy Minister, you have the floor.
Agradeceremos tomar asiento a los participantes, por favor.
Please
Gracias.
take your seats. Thank you.
Agradeceremos a los participantes, por favor, tomar
Please
asiento.
take your seats.
Gracias.
Que nos digan la hora, sí.
Para no excedernos en
Sí,
tiempo.
como que a mí, para no quedarnos cortos. Muy buenos días.
Good morning to all of you.
Quiero en principio
First of all,
expresar mi
I would like to
mi
express
saludo a las autoridades de este foro previo a la
my
asamblea del día de
gratitude
mañana.
to the
Es una
authorities that are here in this forum
inmensa satisfacción,
before the assembly tomorrow.
responsabilidad
I feel a lot of
tocar el tema de las
satisfaction,
cocinas en el Perú,
and it is a great responsibility to talk about the
realmente
culinary
es un
arts here
tema
in Peru,
trascendente,
because it is
desde el
actually
Ministerio
a
de
very
mi sector nos
transcendental
estamos
topic,
enfocando
and
en
from the
manera
Ministry of
integral,
Tourism, we're
integrada,
focusing on that in a
pero también
comprehensive
quiero, voy a
in
tratar,
an
y
integrated
eso
manner,
vamos a
but I'm
completar
also going
muy
to
bien, Mauricio,
try
pero es
with Mauricio as well.
reconocer algunos paradigmas y
We're
algunas
going to
cosas
try to
básicas que
recognize some
tenemos que saber
paradigms and
y
some
que tenemos
basic
que
things that we need to
socializar,
know
porque
and
realmente
we
ha sido muy
need to
alentador
make
lo que se
people
ha
aware
escuchado
of,
aquí.
because everything that we've
Realmente
heard
el
has
hecho,
been
y tiene
very
que ver con la
encouraging.
cocina, y tiene que ver
And
con las regiones, y tiene
this
que ver
has
con
to
todo
do
lo que
with
es
the
el Perú.
cuisine, with
Ha sido muy
regions,
alentador
and
para
with
mí
Peru.
escuchar los
And it has been
discursos,
very
las
encouraging to
intervenciones,
me to
sobre todo
hear
del
the speeches,
secretario
the
de la OEA,
remarks, especially by the Secretary
cuando plantea el
General
tema
of
tan importante
the
de la
OAS when he
problemática
talked
común
about
que
the common
que
problems
se siente, que se vive en el mundo,
that
y que
are
el Perú
experienced
no
in
está
the
al margen,
world, and
obviamente.
Peru is,
Pero qué bueno sería
of course, a
que se
part of
mirasen
that.
siempre
But
de
it
esa
would
manera,
be great
de
for
una
us
manera
to
integral,
always look
reconociendo
at
que la
things
humanidad
this
toda
way, in a
está en
comprehensive
una
manner,
crisis. Porque esto
acknowledging
también
that
acompaña a una
humanity
crisis
is in a
civilizatoria, como lo
crisis,
dijo nuestro
and
ministro Roberto Sánchez,
this
que nos pareció tan
comes together
importante
with
escucharlo.
a crisis of civilization,
Entonces, yo
as
creo
our
que quiero
Minister
tratar de
Sanchez
asociar
said,
algunas
and it was very
situaciones que
important to
están,
mention
que a veces en la
that. So
cocina
I
como
would
que se
like
le
to
ve
mention
aparte,
about
¿no?
some
Porque
situations.
como el acto de
The
comer es un acto
cuisine
normal y
normally
natural,
seems like something
casi no
else,
se
because
piensa
since
sobre
eating
ello.
is something
Se lo
natural and
celebra
normal,
nomás.
sometimes you just do not
la vida.
feel about it, and
No hay
you
na-
just
no hay acto
celebrate
más
it, because
trascendente en la
that is
humanidad que
life.
el
But
acto de comer.
there is nothing more transcendental
Proceso
for humans than
que nos
eating.
llevó
That is the
cientos de miles de
process that
años para
has
ser lo que
taken
hoy
us
somos.
hundreds of
Entonces decía
millions of
que me
years
parecía
to become
importante
what
lo
we
que
are
hemos
now.
oído,
So
porque de
that's why I
verdad
was
escuchar
saying
que
that
se
what we have
comparten
heard is so
problemas,
important, because
situaciones, que
really
se viven
listening that
situaciones, que
problems are
reconocemos
shared and
a lo que nos ha
situations are
confrontado la
shared, and we
pandemia,
acknowledge what
entender
the
nuestra
pandemic
levedad,
has
nuestra
caused,
cosa,
and
lo que somos en el
understanding
mundo.
our lightness
Lleva,
and
creo, a
what we are in the
fortalecernos en
world.
los
That
enfoques,
leads us to
en las formas
strengthen
como
our
nos ubicamos
approaches
frente
and
a temas
how
tan centrales como es
we
el tema de la
react
alimentación, como
upon
es el
issues
tema
that
de la
are so
cocina, no solo
important,
para el
like
Perú,
food and
porque
cuisine,
siempre
not
vamos a
only
hablar
for
del Perú,
Peru,
sino para el mundo.
but we're talking
Y
here
algunas
about
cosas que
the
tienen que saber,
world. And there are
que tengo que
certain things that
compartirles, pues
you need
seguramente
to
lo saben,
know.
pero podría
I'm
enfatizarles
sure
mi
that
calidad de
you know that, but I
investigadora de
can
cocina peruana, 30 años en el
emphasize
tema.
it as a researcher in Peruvian cuisine, because I've been doing so for 30 years. I'm a businesswoman in the sphere of the culinary arts, but I wanted to tell you that the cuisine, still in the academic environment, is still attached to culture. Why? Because it's not integrated as it corresponds to the academia. Here in Peru, we have struggled to have it as a part of university. San Marcos, my university, needs to have as a main topic the knowledge of cuisine, biodiversity, food supplies, environment, and regional cuisines, which is so important, because every country, and not only in Peru, has different cuisines. You have a cuisine when you talk about a country, you are talking about a geographic, political, and administrative delimitation, but a country has different cuisines, like France, Spain, Italy, Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, all of the countries in the world. And why am I mentioning that? Because I think that it is terrible to know that, as I said before, if you don't know it, that the cuisine
is not part of the academia as it corresponds. There is an organization, there are international organizations that group the professionals of social scientists, for example, in this fora like OAS. This issue is just a complementary issue. So I wonder, what do we understand of life and about cuisine if we do not give it the importance that it deserves? So that is the first question. But we have tried to respond, and we have tried to support and to contribute, to incorporate and to discuss, so that there will be a core attitude in the peoples and countries where I've been, and we've always achieved it, because obviously in every country some people feel about this way, specifically in the academia, and that's why, and I'm sorry for giving such a long introduction, but in Peru, from the year 2003, a movement was generated, a movement for the Andean countries, from the Andes to the world. Taste and knowledge, 7 Andean countries, and that was made in 2003 in Peru with the University San Martín de Porres under my leadership, and I'm happy of congratulating all of the Andean countries and sitting together to talk about the cuisine and how we understand it and how we take this on, and we have discovered a reality that we need to address, cuisine and biodiversity, otherwise it cannot be understood. We have a great pantry, right? But it's a lot more than that. It's not just about biodiversity. So this is just an introduction that is very general, because after this Congress we will have Congresses in Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, and while we have had an excellent response and a movement is already being generated, and now precisely we're resuming that, because this was done in every country, and the movement that started in Mexico and it was brought to Peru. This is the first Congress, and I'm sharing with you the feeling that I have as a Peruvian, as a researcher, and I am very Peruvian, and I'm from the Andes, because that is what Peru is like. We still feel that the importance is not given yet as it would correspond to other topics in the country. So from the Deputy Office of Tourism and from the Ministry of Tourism, I work with the Ministry of Culture and with other ministries, because this is another topic, because realities are always seen as something that is isolated, as though we were in a big space and everybody is isolated and you just say hello to the others. So what do we want? We want an overview with propositions about this. So we have proposed at the Ministry of Tourism a strategy of reactivation from the year 2022 to 2025. And what do we want as part of our strategy to reactivate tourism? That is extremely important. We believe, because I've been here for a year at the Deputy Minister's office, and we are proposing sustained work where the reactivation of tourism has as a cross-cutting component the regional cuisines of Peru, and to put them in value. And the first step that was taken several years ago, Mauricio, maybe you don't know it, is to acknowledge picanterias, or these traditional restaurants, as national heritage. And this was work that we did under my direction with a team of 4 or 5 people. This was declared, but they were never formally acknowledged. That is to say, they never received a paper or a diploma that says, okay, from these 6 regions of Peru, Tumbes, Piura, Lambayeque, La Libertad, Cusco, and others, they needed to have an acknowledgement at the door. Who doesn't want a diploma if you have studied, or you would just keep it in university? We had to do that recognition, and we did that through the Vice Minister's office. We worked with Peru and the Ministry of Culture. Why am I telling you this? Because this is the origin of the great cuisine that Peru has. The chicherias, the picanterias, these traditional restaurants in the hands of women of these spaces that used to be houses. That's the origin of the great cuisine of Peru, the great cuisines that Peru has. What today is known as modern cuisine has its origins there. The role of men came later.
El rol fundamental
The fundamental role is in the households by the mothers, by women, and that is the cuisine that was cooked for hundreds of years, because there is even a song of the chicha, this traditional beverage, and that mentions ceviche, chupe de camarones, and picantes. That means that the cuisine already played a role as an ally of the forces that wanted to defeat the domination in our country. So if we take a look at cuisine, it is a lot more important than we believe. And from the Ministry of Tourism, we have generated this brand that is called Viajes con Sabor, or traveling with taste, so that we can position the activity of cuisine in the regions, but with value. And we believe that that is extremely important, because it means to generate a response that is more harmonic, based on harmony from these people that intervene. We have done this acknowledgement in the north and in the south, and we have had a good response, and it was very encouraging to hear the ladies that they are satisfied because their work is being acknowledged. It had already been acknowledged, but it was better if you go into a picanteria and it was recognized as a traditional heritage of the nation. Picanterias and chicherias, these traditional restaurants. Because what is more important than pisco? Chicha. Corn is ours. Grapes came with the Spaniards. Of course, here we have grapes that are genetically modified. Quebranta, for example, pisco is Peruvian. There are 5 reasons because of the Peruvian status of pisco, the name of a bird, of a port, of a city. Well, pisco is Peruvian, but this is another topic that we can talk about in a different time, because there are historical reasons that prove so. So this acknowledgement of picanterias, this traditional restaurants, has been given in the north and in the south, and now with this brand, Viajes con Sabor, or traveling with taste, we are positioning the restaurants that are not necessarily picanterias. These are spaces that give value to local and regional cuisines. Because one way or another, the development of cuisine, the culinary arts, has just stayed in Lima, but there's a lot more than that in the regions. And then we have another work that we have done that is important, and that is the base of what we need to base on, and that has to do with community-based tourism. There is something very important. If you are a foreigner, it's important for you to know that in every area of the Americas, communities are the great spaces of knowledge and wisdom of our farmers and the peoples that make it possible that biodiversity can be kept, so that it can continue, so that the natural and cultural traditional spaces can be kept. And this is a tourism that we are trying to legitimize in the best way with the regions. And it's important for all of us to know and for all of us to share this, because there is a great demand. Some time ago, I was in Spain in a very important event of the World Trade Organization, and what did we see? That was that people, as a trend, as a response to COVID-19 and to reaffirm life, is to meet others. And what gives us that opportunity? Communities in Peru, they are the core of Peru, and Peru has a lot of peoples, and we have intervened and we have given them advice, and I just wanted to strengthen the program of Turismo Emprende, or entrepreneurial tourism, and that's a possibility to make these communities reach the spaces and regions to value all of these different spaces that are based on community-based tourism and also traditional cuisine. Well, there are some other things that I cannot forget, of course, because always when we speak about cuisine, I get excited. And as I said before, community-based tourism, and then traveling with taste, or Viajes con Sabor, and Pueblos con Encanto, or enchanted peoples. Look at so many recognitions that Peru has received. We have just called a little ago Ollantaytambo in Cusco as an enchanted peoples, and we are committing the community, even the children, because if a town town is known as an enchanted town. What do we want? We want the active participation of people because that generates collective self-esteem, and that is important because if the people, they do not love each other, then what can they feel? I think that it's important to break the paradigms because since in a period of time they were not wanted, if they don't love me, I don't love me either. So these paradigms need to be changed, and I think that all of these ideas of enchanted cities and this recognition in 2011 that the OAS gave Peru as for its cuisine as an expression of culture. So I think that all of these situations have favored and have also given value to the possibilities and convergence that Peru has. Other things that have been achieved that are important from the Ministry of Tourism are related to the fact that to support the SMEs, 54.5 million were awarded to support tourism, entrepreneurial companies for SMEs, travel agencies, tourism organizations, congresses, conventions, events, tourist guides, and also artisanal shops. So all of these activities that are done from the Ministry of Tourism, believe me, because that's not what people say when we are in front of the TV cameras, but I want everyone to know, all of the companies and institutions here in our country to know that we are indeed doing everything as possible to have a good reactivation, effective reactivation of tourism, but with a different way to look at it. Everything that you would see from afar before now, it plays a leading role in the tourist offer, and that has to do with the acknowledgement of communities. And now that is translated into a policy of community-based tourism with families intervene, where you can have a tourist that can be part of, for example, the harvesting process for potatoes. When has that happened before? I think that today the crisis that we have experienced has allowed us to become more sensitive, and we have valued these manifestations even more. And it's important for us to know that because really the cuisines of Peru are extremely important, where we value all of the wealth and biodiversity, such as it happens in other countries. And finally, also the cuisines that are shared in the bordering areas of Peru, because we always have to say and know that in Peru and the cuisines, and we know that in Peru the cuisines have no borders. They communicate amongst themselves, and they share different places like Arequipa or Cusco or Coto Relleno, for instance, is an example. So there are many things to focus on, many things to say, but there is an effective reactivation of tourism, and within them the concept of regional cuisines, because I think that this is about knowing that Peru has different types of cuisines, because Peru has a rich cuisine based on its biodiversity, but we also need to generate protection policies, and we're doing that for the environment. Otherwise, if you do not protect the land, the manifestations, there are periods where you have to promote more one product than in other periods. So all of those situations and experiences and these lessons learned, we're taking that to the regions. And I think that that is a great contribution, and especially the great responsibility that we have, because we should always consider, and I think that we're running out of time. So I should give you the floor, but well, this is just a situation that I believe that it's very important for all of us to understand, and we should know that in Peru, with generosity, always the table will be ready, it will be set, and we should invite everyone that can come to the country and say that the table is served, because Peru is there for you. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much, Deputy Minister. Now we'll give the floor to Mauricio Fernandini to talk about the social and economic implications of the rise of the Peruvian culinary arts. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Isabel. Good morning, dear distinguished authorities, the Minister of Energy and Mines, Mrs. Alessandra Herrera, Mrs. Amora Carvajal, Executive President of PROM Peru, and other authorities. I have been involved in the Peruvian culinary arts since 2000. I'm a culinary arts journalist, and I have had the opportunity to follow very closely the work of Isabel.
De manera solitaria, Jorge,
Jorge, as well as researching the Andean grains, the varieties of potatoes, and you have the opportunity of receive all that set of information and create this document about the Peruvian culinary arts. And I am saying this because there is no doubt that Peru has a magnificent biodiversity. And of course, it trickles down to Peru's culinary arts. Peru has microclimates. Some of them are highly concentrated in Puno. There's no questions about how rich the Peruvian culinary arts is.
Consagrado cocinero japonés.
A very well-known Japanese chef Nobu Matsuhisa came to Peru. His restaurant required you to book a place 3 months ahead. When he came to Peru, he said, the greatest success of Nobu is due to Peruvian inputs. The limo capsicum, the yellow capsicum. We have been able to win some discerning palates thanks to them. The Peruvian and Japanese culinary arts have blended and made me different. You better not know how we can get the limo capsicum and yellow capsicum into the U.S. Anyone that tries to grow limo and yellow capsicum in other parts of the world will not find the same taste and spiciness that you have here when you grow it in Huancayo. Peru knows no boundaries when it comes to the culinary inputs. We have countless numbers of products. We have a vast amount of copper, and we are the second producer in the world of copper. There's a high demand of copper, and if we all agree, we can become the top exporters of copper. And I'm going to take the conversation to this point. There's no question about our wealth, our natural wealth, but we need to come together and agree in a common path. Do we know the north we want to go to? We need to do that for culinary arts, archaeological tourism, mining. I don't think that we have done our job. Do we have the capacity to come to an agreement, to listen to each other? I think so. We can define our north, at least one. Today we're going to talk about culinary arts. That is the topic of today's panel. And I'm going to take you back to Puno. Back there, I was received by the Quispe family. We were there in a experiential tourism. They live near the Titicaca Lake with 3 children. I was doing a program that's called 20 Lucas. It was, we had a guest that's called Ivan Kisik. He passed away, and we were going to record this program in Cusco with the Quispe family. The Quispe family was engaged in farming trouts from the lake and growing potatoes. They had a bio garden and numerous numbers of aromatic herbs. Mr. Kisik started to name some of them. We had lunch like at 5 p.m. and the lady of the house showed Ivan how to use the mortar. She sat down and she skillfully processed the procauto, capsicum, and muña, pico, and other herbs. She mixed an interesting aromatic paste and placed covered a shape with it. Then, of course, it was free-range sheep, and little by little, Kisik was asking questions to the lady of the house, and this lady as well shared her information with Ivan. And I cannot forget this image because of its landscape, cultural wealth, and the integration of everything. The Kisbeh family shared with us that most people that came to their house were from the European continent, that they would like for Peruvians to enjoy this experience, that Peruvians should come to the houses of the families living around the Titicaca Lake, that they should not go to a hospital, to a hotel or hostel. How can they allure in Peruvians to these type of experiences, where they could find everything? And now, I'm going to share with you my experience on the fishermen's communities in the coastline and other communities that I work with. And then I went to work on Amazonian communities. And I moved from one to the other, so that people could learn about different types of fish and fruits and foodstuff. I remember that Madrid Fusion Fair was coming about, and we usually sent in a representative. We wanted to position the Peruvian culinary art in the world. At the time, they decided to invite Pedro Miguel Schiaffino. He is a well-trained chef, and the topic was the culinary arts in the Amazon. He was one of the persons that most studied that topic. Mrs. Carvajal, the person who was in charge at the time, said, Pedro Miguel needs to go to Madrid Fusion, but we don't have a video about the work that he has been doing at the Amazon. I don't know how you're going to pull this off, but you have to go in with Pedro and record this. Well, Miguel is traveling to Madrid the day after tomorrow, so we had to rush. We didn't plan. If we had planned things with deadlines and this and that, things may have turned out differently. But we as Peruvians, we are spontaneous. We are happy when we sort things out our own way. So together with Pedro, I went in with a team of cameramen to Iquitos. And we went into a camel plantation. We fished a paiche and many other produce. When he went to Madrid, he caused an important impact, and it echoed. And we translated into the visit of many Spaniards to Iquitos. Many Spaniards came to Iquitos to visit the place, as well as journalists and other foreigners came to Peru. A team of Spaniards came to learn more about Peruvian biodiversity, to go to the market, and to visit Villa Maria del Triunfo, which is like a living museum. If you go there, and I don't know how many of you have done that trip, there you will find our maritime wealth exposed. on a daily basis. It's perfect. And I remember that the Spaniards promoted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Spain said to us that the backbone of Peruvian culinary art is based on yellow capsicum. And the lady in the market says that they call it ají causa, and the other lady call it green capsicum. Which is the capsicum that you're talking about? Well, that's it. That is how we talk. We understand among ourselves very well, but how can we teach others? How can we show others outside Peru that we have a capsicum that is called different ways, but it's the same capsicum? Of course, Spaniards were astounded with our wealth of biodiversity, with this great
donde durante 20 años me ha tocado gestionar periodismo gastronómico y ser una suerte
it came to a point in this
sector privado
career that I had to be like the hinge between the private sector and the state, and the best moment were when them both came together and pulled together gastronomic festivals abroad. For example, we had this traditional visit of the President of the Republic inaugurating the Mistura Festival. The last president to inaugurate Mistura was Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. After that, we haven't had that kind of feast.
Puntos en común, privado.
We have found commonalities between the private and public sector. Mistura became the most important Latin American culinary arts fair. The human capital was important. We had important conference with participants from all over the world.
Campesinos.
Also, we had the participation of farmers who explained to us how they grew their potatoes, the varieties they had, and we became aware and sensitized. To tell you the truth, culinary arts have been like a meadow, a place for us to find ourselves, and I am convinced that the state, the public sector, and the citizens need to keep in a dialogue to find the north. We must all do that to leverage this opportunity. I thank God for giving me the opportunity of being witness to this. I lived this myself, how your family, your mother, Julia, you had Señorío de Surco restaurant here in Miraflores, and I witnessed the following. I'm going to share with you this.
Salir de los 90.
The 90s hit us very hard. We had a terrorist war running up and down Peru. And little by little, the culinary arts movement started to give the Peruvians an identity. It gave Peru a reason to be proud of. We merged the pre-Inca culture, we pulled from the diversity and faced our identity without fear, humility, and now we're sharing the world who we are. From 200 Peruvian restaurants, now we have 4,000 restaurants about Peru around the world. So now we are receiving an amazing number of emails. Young people asking us, where can they study culinary arts in Peru? Many are asking how to get an internship in a Peruvian restaurant. I want to learn more about Peru, and this is something that we attained.
que el mundo ponga su mirada en nuestro país y que el turismo
I know that the world will turn its eyes to Peru,
enterarse de este fenómeno.
and people will learn about this phenomenon.
En su momento, reconozco
I need to acknowledge that there was an alliance in a given moment between the government, the private sector, and the citizens. I have never been part of the government. I know that you have been, Isabel, but I have always played the role of a hinge between one and the other. And we need to acknowledge the leaders, the speakers, of the time. We need to go back to the country's agenda that will pass, that will pave the way to our north. We don't want to have the story of the rich family that is disputing their legacy, their heritage, and then lose all.
Que la fortuna desaparece y todos
we don't want to lose our wealth and become impoverished.
La riqueza del país.
There's no doubt that we have a country that is bountiful.
Pero tendremos la capacidad.
Do we have the capacity then to reach an agreement and multiply that wealth?
Confío que sí.
I hope
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Fernandini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandini. I just briefly want to say something. This will take less than 2 minutes. I know we need to leave. I want to emphasize something. We need to bring together the different sectors. For example, the regional governments need to be the leaders and support the incorporation of picanterias and restaurants. We need to work from the bottom up and top down too. Peru is trying to boost community tourism, community-based tourism, picanterias and so on. Let me share with you, the picanterias restaurants is a one-of-a-kind attainment. It's like acknowledging our grandmothers. There is where we can find the legacy, the knowledge, the centuries-old information. Many of them have passed away. For me, it has been wonderful to visit the north and see the ladies receive a diploma on behalf of their mothers because their mothers passed away because of COVID. We need to be ahead of the times. If we don't understand our kitchen, then how can we understand life? We live thanks to food. Therefore, it's important to acknowledge the kitchen as the place for us to grow. Remember that food is at the key, it's at the core of our life. Thank you, Isabel. I agree with you, and I reiterate how important it has been to acknowledge the ladies leading the Picanterias restaurant. Now let's move on to shrimps. We are going to go to Coride, where there is where shrimps are naturally harvested. That is an amazing spectacle.
¿Qué pasa si el Estado no
What happens if shrimps are not out of season? It's not about publishing our law, but to enforce it. Enforce the ban. What happened with this lady at the Picanteria restaurant? She has been there for generations and is part of our identity. But if they don't have enough shrimps, if the government does not regulate, then it will happen that in this turmoil we will live. I don't know, how can we deal with this situation? Who is the one that will tell us that the shrimp ban was successful? It's important that the cooks or chefs understand that at a given point in the year, you cannot consume shrimp. So once again, we need to agree that the government, the private sector, and the speakers need to speak the same message. If we have disagreements, okay. We can agree to disagree, but we need to know our north, and we need to go in that direction always. Thank you very much to the speaker, the Mrs. Isabel Alvarez and Mauricio Fernandini. Before going to the responsible investment roundtable, we will break for coffee for 10 minutes.
Agradeceremos a los participantes tomar asiento, por favor. La última mesa dará
Please
comienzo.
take your seats. The final panel will now take place.
Agradeceremos a los señores participantes a tomar asiento, por favor.
Please take your seats.